as we move forward. Also seeing a couple of things as we go forward. We have a couple of items here. One, I know I saw in the newspaper today some things about the aquaculture issue for the I guess the state of Florida Department of Agriculture off of Scenic Highway. We had been asked a while back about this, and on May 8th we sent a letter over to Nikki Freed's people dealing with asking that they change the line of aquaculture. We have the map sort of up here. You can kind of see what's there. One of the things that they do in aquaculture, they only like you to harvest oysters or grow oysters where there's not I guess people by there. And as you go from north to south, there's a significant area on where the Bluffs Park is, because no one lives there. It certainly serves as that area. What they did have is there's this little triangle down here that they kind of, as the houses get there, that kind of angles down, which gives people a chance to take leases further down where there are people living. And what we've asked, I guess a couple of years ago, I was asked as a county commissioner, and I went to see then Adam Putnam and his staff, and I told them at that time that we certainly, is there a way to do this? And they said, hey, if the city was to make a request, because it's really their jurisdiction, we would honor that. So the city has made that request. I did take that letter from May 8th, and I did send that to Robert Bender, and then I saw somewhere online that Jeff Burgash asked about it. Jeff and I talked about it. I sent it to him too. So I did send that to him. I understand the county took that up last Thursday. I saw that. We did ask them to take that up from our standpoint. Again, the state is asking right now for public input, so I think this is the proper time, and I'm sorry that Commissioner Underhill didn't understand that, but I think this is the proper time that the city and the county, when the state's asking where we need to put leases, that they go ahead and do this. And there are miles and miles of lease opportunity that aren't off somebody's shoreline. So again, what we have basically said is sort of where Donnie McMahon's oysters are, that sort of at the end of the Bluffs Park, it go perpendicular out from there, and everything north of that is still allowable. We have miles and miles of coast off of Bay Bluffs Park that is open for oystering. What we were asking is that area south of where you start having residences and some of those condominiums right there, that at this point we not allow oyster leases any further than that. So I should have said something about that perhaps last week, just sort of escaped me, and I wanted to correct it after I saw something in the news and say at least what we were looking to do. There's also, Allie has been on me to remind me that we will be appointing 3 new people to the DIB, and we are looking for names. We're going to send stuff out if people want to volunteer. The DIB is a little interesting because you have to be a taxpayer in the district. So there is a map, and you have to be in that district, and you have to pay taxes. Now, you can lease a piece of property as long as you pay the taxes in the lease, and you also can be, if you're in a business, if you own a business, or like you're a law partner, you're one of multiple owners in the business, as long as some way or another you have some. You're in the line of either ownership or an officer of that corporation, you can participate. So we will be taking DIB nominations, and we'll be looking for that. That will go to the council in the June meeting, June 14th. So we're looking for people to give us nominations. We'll have 3 places up, and so we're looking for 3 new members. Obviously, we'd like to be working with them on what we could do about some parking, and how we perhaps implement going forward some kind of strategy, and working together the 2 different apps, making sure that people understand better which app is which, and how to deal with that, and what are the right hours, and what are the right prices. I think the one thing about going to the app, it does allow us to have a variable rate for parking, and I've said for a long time that when those areas, especially like on the west side over here of downtown, when you get after 5 o'clock, I mean, you can drive up and down, and we're still charging people for parking, and there's not a single person parking. If you listen to Donald Shoup, his first thing is parking should go to 0 at that point. There needs to be some kind of ability to reprice in certain times. If we have people that won't go up to the top of the deck, we need to make the price variable. We need to to cut the price down and encourage people to go to the top of the deck. And if they go to the top of the deck, that's good. That's extra spots we have. We want to fill them up. We want as many people down here, but we want them to find stuff. And if there are places that people don't park, then we need to figure out how to incent them to do that. So again, and one of the things we want to do is we'll go talk to the county. The top of their deck is sitting fenced in right now, so we've got probably 50 spaces up there that are fenced in right now. And we'd like to get those back open and show people what they could do and give them the opportunity to lease those spaces at a discounted rate, just to tell people there are places to park downtown. We can find those. Again, from there, the last thing that I wanted to do, and I was told they were going to be here, but I don't see everybody that I see in the audience. Maybe one of y'all are going to have a question about this later, but I just kind of want to make some comment because it seems to have been fairly in the news right now about some concerns that I think some people in Santa Rosa County had with Heather Lindsay. I know I talked to the News Journal, called me on Friday, and I told them no, I expect Heather to do a job for us as an attorney. When she goes to something like the TPO, my expectation of her is to represent the people who she's there to represent. She's not there as the part of the city of Pensacola. She's there as part of the city of Milton. I don't understand this issue that everybody's having, and I really wish we could get by this, I'd like to call it this parochial poison, that we can't understand how somebody can do something in one specific spot. You know, the time I'm going to say that I saw this perhaps firsthand was in the late 90s. I was on the YMCA, the United Way board, and we were looking to merge Escambia and Santa Rosa County, and we got a tremendous amount of pushback in the city of Milton about how dare we could merge those two. Well, again, we see what happens. We ended up having something where somebody embezzles $600,000, and now we're in a merged situation. I think this whole part of what's happening, we've got to be able to work with people and figure out we're a much bigger community. You know, as far as TPO votes, maybe it's because I don't understand. I've always tried to vote what's best for the community, not what's best for what I think my little area that I represent, because the overall whole is going to be bigger. 50% of the people wake up this morning in Santa Rosa County, you know what they did? They come to Escambia County to work. So saying that somehow or another that line through the Escambia River matters, it really doesn't. The majority of our citizens, it might matter to us who are elected officials, but it doesn't matter to anybody else who lives in the two communities. And the idea when we get to understand that we really are one area working together, we're going to be a lot more successful. And so from that standpoint, I was not a part of Heather's hiring. That was Susan decided to do it, but she came to me and I said, I have no problem with it. Certainly I understand Heather may have to deal with some challenges in her area because some people don't understand what we're doing, but I have no problem. And I certainly have no problem saying that, because if you go to Berry Hill Road, there's a cemetery there, and if you go in the middle of the cemetery, there's a little area for the Robinsons, and that's where my family comes from. So I have no problem critiquing. We are a part of that community as far back as we go for generations. So I still have a lot of family over there in Santa Rosa County, and I love them. But on this one, they're wrong. And, you know, again, I expect Heather to do her job for the city of Pensacola, and when she's attending functions for the city of Milton, that's her job. Because I think the part that takes me back is when somebody says, you know, how do you expect her to vote? So the only reason I think that she would ever have to worry about that if she was worried about her job. So are you saying to me that somehow or another I'm going to fire her if she doesn't work for Pensacola, vote for Pensacola? That's not it at all. It's not what we've come here to do. That's not what we're building, the regional community we want to build. So again, these are my thoughts on it, and I'm disappointed by this thinking that continues to, I think, set us back, and I think the more we can work together, the better off we'll be. Now that means we'll have moments where we don't agree. There may be a Milton sidewalk project she wants to push. It's not going to bother me at all in the least. That's what happens at the TPO. I've served on that board. I've been chair of that board twice, and we don't always vote the same way, but I still respect everyone that was on that board. And it was me that cast the deciding vote to keep Avalon going, or we could have stopped Avalon probably about a mile north, and it wouldn't have gotten 4-laned all the way to the interstate. Now you can drive 6 lanes on the interstate and 4 lanes all the way to Milton. So, you know, that was my vote that made that happen. And I will say it was able to pay back in the sense that when we had to deal with the Pensacola landing of the bridge, I was able to remind several Santa Rosa commissioners of that, and they supported me and getting money for the Pensacola landing on the bridge in the TPO priorities, which got the funding for that. So again, when we work together, we're going to get a lot more things done for this community. And that's the spirit I hope that we want to put from the City Hall here at the City of Pensacola, and what we want to continue to keep working together. This is sort of things I have, sort of now. What are things you have, questions you have? Andrew?
On the scooters?
Yes.
Tallahassee has voted in a 3-month pilot program for scooters as opposed to going to a full ordinance. Are you guys considering the possibility of a limited time to study and see, or are you committed to going to an ordinance that will allow it?
We're committed to going to an ordinance that allows us to enter into contract. Both Blue Duck and us were amenable to that, and the reason I like it is because the ordinance will not just give you full right to go do it. The ordinance simply gives you the right, if you have a contract, to come back in. The reason I like the it's a license to use contract, or it's going to be something along those lines, is it allows us to, if they don't live up to what we ask them to do, then we have the ability to pull that contract. So again, I think as long as that's the case, then I'd rather have an ordinance that allows us to enter into these agreements, and then the agreements they require parts on both parties. So it's not just an ordinance gives you the chance to just go act, and you really have no ability to work with them. So when we talked to Blue Duck, they were very amenable to working with us. Like I said before last week, even down to the point where they said, we recognize we're using your right-of-way for leasing. We ought to pay you something for that. And we said, yeah. But it was interesting. They did make one request. They said they wanted to see any money that they paid along that line go toward something that would work for making the community more bikeable and safe, walkable. So again, we look forward to doing that. I think there's some challenges. We certainly have seen some injuries. I saw something on Facebook just today about that, an injury that happened, and I try to remind people there are injuries that happen with people walking, injuries with people bike riding or cars. It doesn't mean we stop using the roads. What we do, and usually most of those cases where somebody gets injured, is because somebody didn't use it responsibly. We simply ask that try to look at everything that uses it responsibly. And I would say, look how many cars have driven on the road today and we haven't heard anything. That's a generally good sign. Not that we're trying to be eliminate those things that we have, the negative part, but overall, for the most part, people use the road, and when they use it right, it functions correctly. Our case is figuring out how to make sure we don't have people that use the road improperly. And that's what we're going to hold with and continuing to work with Blue Duck Scooters. That's one of the reasons we made it very clear in there. We wanted to talk about insurance and liability, and those are some of the things we've discussed. But again, every day people use the road. For the most part, everybody gets where they need to get safely. Unfortunately, every now and then we do have accidents, and we just try to work within that and try to make things safer the next time.
But it seemed like their approach was, every locale is different. Let's try it here for 3 months and see what we get. The approach of allowing a contract within an ordinance is, if it's a catastrophe, but they're within the parameters of their side of the contract, well, tough for us. But if it's a pilot program and it's a catastrophe, well, we can try again a different way.
I think the catastrophe will typically happen if you're outside the rules of what we're indicating. Again, I think what happens is if you don't put your scooters up, if we have somebody get injured because there's just abandonment and we have sidewalks blocked or something happens, an injury along there, that's going to be covered in what we've asked them to do with abandonment. I hear what you're saying. Either way, I think we can kind of get to what we want to get to. If we begin to see a significant amount of problems, it gives us the chance to pull back on that contract when the terms aren't filled. So, I would like to see what's happening, Andrew. But again, I don't know that 3 months. What happens? You go 3 months, you don't have the accident until 6 months, or the catastrophe. I mean, at some point you got to figure out how to move and then try to put yourself as much as possible. So, unless you're just going to repeatedly put it on 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months every time. So it's kind of the same thing. We thought having a contract with groups would allow us to weed out those that don't want to work with us, that just want to have just come in and do whatever. And at least from what we've seen with Blue Duck, they initially in the discussions have been open to working with us. And so our discussion was very good. We're going to try to bring forward an ordinance at the next meeting, and then the following meeting for the second reading, we'll try to have maybe a contract agreement with them. That's going to be awfully optimistic, but you know, Susan's been working hard. I thought she did a great job last week with the ordinance that we passed. I thought it was a good ordinance. Again, we have one more reading on it, but I thought she did a good job turning that around. And she also had another one. She made a slight, I know she forgot to do something, although she had done it in the actual one. She hadn't done it in the one that she sent to the council members, but they're working hard. And I think having an in-house legal that can now turn those things around quickly for us is very valuable to the city. And I think they've done a great job. I really appreciate the work that Susan's done. Clay?
Roman, not to beat dead horse, if the duck ordinance, the duck scooters come about, will they be disallowed from riding on the sidewalk?
That's an interesting discussion in that. You know, again, the idea is they typically are in the road. I think they would have the license to use. We will simply evaluate that and what happens with sidewalk. But they will be leasing on the sidewalk. They will have their scooters parked on the sidewalk to lease. That's what they did.
On the sidewalk.
The idea is they should be in the road. They should be in the road.
You got the bikes to contend with also on the sidewalk. It's going to bring that issue forward.
Correct, but we have places where people bike on the sidewalk too. I mean, you certainly see that happen on fairly significant high-speed streets. The one thing we've seen, I have seen, they're submitting a map to us. They were very clear that they don't believe that they should be utilized in streets that go, 35 miles an hour and more. They're like neighborhood streets, 30 miles an hour and slower is what they believe they should be on. That was the discussion. So they want to try to map to fit that. And it is challenging. They do want to do them on Pensacola State College, which is challenging because while you get geofence, the fact is the boundaries of Pensacola State College are Airport and 9th Avenue and 12th Avenue, all of which are crazy streets that drive that much. So there is going to be some, but I mean, I think that's where you could see them on the sidewalk. I mean, all those streets have sidewalks right in there. It is very possible that you would see it on the sidewalk. So I'm not going to say it's going to be totally abandoned, but it's going to be, the only time we really want to see them on sidewalks is if it's one of those high-speed streets in those areas. So I think as we go forward, there's going to be a little bit of give and take as we try to work through this ordinance. I think we've asked them to be responsible, and they've tried to ask us to be open, and that's where we're trying to go right now. Yes?
When you're looking for your DIV members, what are you looking for? And I'm not talking about like just the base requirements, but philosophically, what are you looking for?
Philosophically, I'm looking for somebody that's willing to be open to parking. I will say, I think one of these, one of the members I've talked to, that he's going to be on there. I thought Kevin Lehman has had some ideas in that variable pricing. I would like to see that concept come forward a little bit more and trying to figure out where we are. So I know he worked on that. I know he's expressed an interest in serving, and I do think he's going to be one of the people we put forward. Kevin Lehman, he has the was it the Fosco coffee house there, but also one of the things that's happened is that we've talked about, we want all of our stuff to represent sort of who we are better. It's been a while since I think we've had an African American. I don't know if we've ever had one on the DIB, so I'm looking for someone who's an African American that's in the downtown area. So trying to find, would love for that to be represented, and I do have an individual who is going to be applying. At least I know one that will be applying and looking at those discussions. Aaron Watson, attorney.
Mayor, can I go back for a second to Mayor Lindsay?
Yes.
A couple of days after you announced her employment, she applied. She requested a sunshine law investigation of herself. Any concerns or a comment about that?
No, I think it speaks to her character. I think she said she was very sure that she didn't break the law, and what she said was here, I'm so sure I broke the law, I'm going to turn myself in and say, come take a look at it. I think her sending out a one-way communication I absolutely agree with her. My understanding of the Sunshine Law requires two-way communication. Her sending out a communication, she's able to do that. I mean, that's what happens. Now, the unfortunate part is she does kind of silence the rest of her board, but I think on this issue, it was something that was coming to the head at the next meeting they were having. So I don't think there was really any time that would have had that, and I think it was important to reflect that information to her board. Again, I think
Was this her idea alone?
it certainly wasn't my idea. I didn't ask anything about it. But I support it. I think it speaks highly. I mean, that we should all be able to say, hey, if you have a problem, if you think there's a problem, then do something. I had the same issue. If you remember, we got called on a day about dealing with the bridge, and I was chair of the TPO, and they called me up and said, hey, the whole funding may go away on the bridge because of this intended lawsuit that Matt Danheiser said he was going to bring. It better get you have by the end of the day to get this fixed. So from that standpoint, I knew that Matt and I talking about his personal lawsuit or Gulf Breeze's lawsuit had nothing to do with what I was going to vote on. I did communicate to him. He said he needed to make a decision. Matt Danheiser appealed his decision and withdrew in writing, so the bridge moved forward, and it's happening. But I knew then I didn't violate the Sunshine Law because there was no way that could be something that we would ever vote on. He has the ability, or Gulf Breeze has the ability. I don't sit on Gulf Breeze, and I'm not him personally. So again, I knew what the rule was, but it doesn't stop people from getting. They think the minute you talk that somehow that creates a violation of the Sunshine. It has to be something that you would vote on to move forward. So.
Could this open the door to other inter-city or inter-county relationships?
I hope it will. I certainly hope as we move forward, we get to a point where we're working together. I've been meeting with Cherry Fitch. There's no secret that the relationship between Gulf Breeze and Pensacola was very strained during the last administration. We don't believe that's good going forward. We share a beach. We share a lot of things with Gulf Breeze. We're not always going to agree, but we should be communicating with each other. If there are things that Gulf Breeze has to advocate on their behalf, it's not going to bother me. We both put the best projects forward, and we see what happens. But I will say this: if Gulf Breeze is successful, it helps me be successful. I never understood when App River moved from Pensacola to Gulf Breeze, it was somehow made out like the community lost. The community didn't lose; they stayed within the region. When we begin to see ourselves as a region, we will be more successful in what we do. It's happened everywhere where you see successful communities. They embrace the regional nature of what they are. Now that doesn't mean they don't continue to work on things that are right for their community. They embrace a regional need. People ask me all the time, how did I feel about other Triumph requests? I said, I'm excited. I'm excited that Eastern Shipbuilding is going to start moving forward. If they are successful in Panama City, I'm going to eventually be successful here. So, I'm a big regional guy. I've promoted regional cooperation at the county. I've tried to do so here at the city. It's been the way we've been wanting to act and go. And like I said, we've been meeting actively with Commissioner May, and now that they're kind of through some of their issues and have now a county administrator, we're going to be meeting back again. We have a lot of things. We had a real good summit, and then we kind of got sidetracked as they sort of got sidetracked. We're hoping to pick that back up. He and I talked last week, and we're hoping to catch up again sometime here in May and start to look at where we go from that summit that we had on homelessness.
On parking, you mentioned that there's two apps. There's the two colored signs. There's city parking, VIB. There's bootable parking. There's all these issues, and then people complaining about rates charged on private lots. But they're engaged in commerce. Is there regulation right now? Do you foresee anticipating regulation to try to merge that into a more cohesive package?
I would like to try to work. There's nothing, again, that says, you're right, we can't stop them from conducting commerce. Can we work with them to try to make it better? There's nothing that says we can't sit down with the private lots and see what we can do to do that. I did meet with Bobby Switzer the other day after I had said the thing about we could take an ordinance and stop the bootable. His issue was, I'll sign up for that right now if you can tell me that legally I have an ability to enforce the tickets I give. I don't have to give boots, but that right now the only way I can enforce my tickets, City of Pensacola, you can enforce your tickets because you can put them on my license and my renewal, and I don't ever get anything back. I can't do that on the private lot, so how do I enforce it? It's one of the things I did talk to Susan about, and I've not heard back from her on that, so that's one of those that it's good to remind me. So I hope if she's watching the press conference, she'll remember I do need that. I need to get with her about that. But, she's just been extremely busy trying to put together a team, and she's just gotten full staff. Or actually, Heather's been hired, but she won't start until June. So at that point, she'll become full staffed. But there are a lot of things going on here. I mean, that's a question we have, and we want to be fair. Clay, I know as a downtown owner, I know you have probably some interest on that.
Well, I do, and that's an interesting point you brought up. DIB, when they write tickets, they know they're going to get their money, because when the people go to get their new tag, DMV runs interference and gets the money before they issue a tag. But premium does not have that ability, so I understand without the booting ability, they have no ability to get paid, and
that's correct. And we are working to find out if we can attach something to it and get rid of the boots. We would like to do that.
Can the DIB do that because it's a municipal?
Well, either the DIB or the city. We're still we need to get a legal opinion, and that's one of the things I'm waiting for Susan to give me. But she's been a little busy, so she would say. She would say they're all different things are coming in at whatever time, and that's one that has not been pushing us as diligently. I'd like to get sort of a new DIB board that I think will be more receptive to working with the city.
You mentioned our limited ability to regulate them as private lots, but the thought was just if they're engaging in commerce, that immediately puts them within the realm of regulation.
Absolutely. Well, I mean. They can't do anything blank slate. I mean, we do have a little bit the ability to regulate, but I think the challenge is enforcement. And I think if they asked us, I mean, this is the same thing. The city can make laws, but if somebody took us to court, we want to make sure we're on the right side of that. And I think if we were just to simply give them no mechanism of enforcement, we might find ourselves in a. Again, I'm not ever afraid of getting sued. I'm afraid of getting sued when I'm not set up correctly, where I might lose. It's one of the things. People can sue you for any reason. That doesn't mean they're going to win. I would like to make sure we've protected ourselves and we've set forward an ordinance, and I have a legal opinion that will work going forward. But those are absolutely things we want to look at, and I think that's one of the things we'd like the DIB to look at. How can we put together a better package for what we do with parking?
I was just thinking about a way to merge them, to bring the private in under the DIB, so you get enforcement, app simplicity, kind of all of it together.
That was kind of the idea when they all worked together. But then there was kind of in the public and the media there was kind of this like, oh, that's collusion. They shouldn't work. It's one of those things. You got problems if you do. You got problems if you don't. I mean, it's just. How do you work? So I think the better part is that we're in communication. The better part of how these agencies work together, and again, I'd be the first to say, I get it. I don't expect what the DIB wants and what I want to always be the same thing, but I would like to have a DIB that was more amenable to working with where we are.
Obviously, parking is a big part of DIB, but its whole purpose in being created was to eliminate water downtown and that kind of thing. What role do you see the DIB play in going into the future?
I agree with you, Jim. I think I tell people all the time they get mad about things, but the DIB has made a lot of decisions that have made things better. I know my friend back there, Clay Resch, served on the board. They've made decisions that have changed things dramatically. I remember working with them when there was the decision to make Balin and Palafox two-way streets, and Spring and Balin two-way streets. And I think we've seen the fruit of what has happened. I mean, it's made things more walkable. They took out all the stoplights. I will also remind people that every decision the DIB makes is not a great decision. They also decided they would do the backwards parking. I thought I had no problem with trying it. It was a very simple fix. They tried it. we took up the stuff and we put it back in the forward angle and move forward. But every now and then you're going to make a few decisions that don't make sense. I'd rather us every now and then look at a couple of things and then how we amend them. I told you the other day, y'all were in there the other day, I'm not looking for perfect, I'm looking for improvement. If we are improving as a community every day, we're getting better, then that's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for us to be perfect, and that means every now and then we're gonna come up with ideas that don't fully implement. That doesn't mean they were bad ideas or we shouldn't have done it. It just means we learned that there was a different way to do things. So, I think the DIB has a role in that. I think the DIB did with starting gallery night. I know that's not their thing anymore, and they want to do other stuff. I do think the what they did with the lights at Christmas time has shown very successful. I think they have a purpose, and I think they can make downtown better. I just think we need to be working together, and that's part of what Chris has wanted to do. And I want to say a big appreciation for Lisa. I mean, she's gotten it. She's on board, and she wants to come inside the city fold and be working with city staff and working in that direction. I will also say last week I met with Helen Gibson, and I think Helen is moving in that same direction with CRA. The council is still going to run CRA. It's not the mayor's trying to take over the CRA, but we need CRA staff to work within a city framework so that when we're all pulling together, we're all doing the exact same thing and we know what we're all doing. And I see Derek shaking his head in the back. I mean, obviously we want Public Works not the DIB to be going this way, or the CRA to be going that way, and the city through Public Works to go that way. That just doesn't solve things. We need everything working together. If we do that, we're going to move forward. I'm not trying to take over those decisions. It's still the council's decision. I really appreciate everything that Councilwoman Canada Wynn does, and I'm not trying to take any of that. What I'm just trying to do is make us more efficient. Jeremy?
You mentioned a minute ago a little bit of a stall out on the post-homeless summit efforts. Is that just on the county's end? Has the city been working at all on that?
The city's been looking at it, but it's a two-party function. And again, we finished it up, and then we went into a variety of things that sort of happened with the county moving forward with getting their administrator. And I think some of the problems that are happening, I think getting a permanent full-time leader, I think will smooth a lot of those problems out. I know that Lumen and I did talk last week, and we said, hey, we got to pick back up these things that we were doing. We were making good progress, and we kind of got slowed down. But it's not their fault. The same thing happened to me in March. I was gone 3 out of the 4 weeks of March, and they could easily have pointed at me and say, hey, we lost time in March because you were out of town on these different things. So, it's just kind of a function of some things that happened. But I think whatever we do, the city and the county need to be moving in lockstep, both whatever decision we make, because otherwise we're just pushing the problem from one jurisdiction to the other jurisdiction unless we function together. And I do appreciate, I think Commissioner May has taken the same approach. He sees the value of both jurisdictions moving this way together, and that the solution will take that. And I'll be the first one to say, listen, they've got a lot more money to work with than I do. So I couldn't make some of these things happen. If we decide we want a day center and do something else or something, I mean, the city's capability to take that on by itself is not going to happen. I mean, or else it's going to be like a day center about as big as this room. I mean, we only have so much capacity. That's where we need the county to work with. They have significantly deeper pockets than we do, and we need to work with them toward that end. So we're going to be a part of it, but as I always say, every city resident is also a county resident and pays the same county millage. So we expect that way working forward. So we're going to try to work together.
Could we go back to the aquaculture discussion just for a second, because I'm not as familiar, and maybe you can just show me on the map. What I'm curious about with the letter to Commissioner Freed, what specific change is being proposed for what specific area? Because I was kind of getting north, south, and
I'll read you the letter. It says,
oh, wonderful.
Mrs. Sapp, who works, Portia Sapp, who's the director of the Division of Aquaculture. It says, Dear Ms. Sapp, the City of Pensacola respectfully requests that the Department of Agriculture limit aquaculture within the city's jurisdiction of Escambia Bay to north of 30.43 latitude line shown on the enclosed map. The prior Commissioner of Agriculture indicated that the state would honor this request. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Grover Robinson.
Perfect.
So what we're asking is that a latitude line, again, so the idea is what happens, you'll see, is the line kind of comes further south of where there are actually properties on the shore, and then it kind of angles so that even further properties to the south could have oysters as you move offshore. What we've asked them to do is to rotate that line and come up to that 30.43, which is the end of Bluffs Park, and it can only be north of that line.
Okay, just kind of proactive.
But, you know, I will say when I talked with them last year as a county commissioner, I mean, they were very clear to me, listen, the reason we like this area is because there's no inhabitation on the shoreline, which you have miles of uninhabited area, which leads to better quality for oysters.
Perfect.
So, again, it fits what they were saying. And, again, we have miles of shoreline. Now, I realize there's kind of a rush to get to the south end because there may be better salinity for the oysters. But at the end of the day, we want to be able to grow our oysters and do with aquaculture, but we also got to do it in a way that we feel is responsible for our citizens.
Is there suitable salinity north of Don Command's plot?
Yeah, I mean, it just changes. It may change your taste or something else, but there's, again, all that area is workable.
Is the only problem to the south aesthetics?
I mean, it is part of, that's part of the issue. Now, again, I'll show you the map, and you'll see the line doesn't continue to go very, very far south, close to the shore. It gets negated. Eventually, it is not just aesthetics; it's environmental sensitivity. So that's not the only thing, but to an extent, the little portion that we're talking about cutting out, which is not, you'll see, it's not that significant. Is mostly dealing with things related to with the issue of site.
And again, just to clarify, you guys have been leading the request. The county was responsive to your request.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about the overlay district the council gave?
Yeah, I think it was I think it's going to be a move that we're going to look back years from now and say it was a good thing. Now, within that said, I think, again, not everything about the overlay at this point is probably perfect, and we're still working with some things as we move forward. I would say there'll probably be some projects that come in that are brought in that show we haven't thought of every single thing. I think at some point you move forward with the legislation because the overall arching part is more important. It's saying some of the things we want to do. We want to protect the character of who we are in some of these neighborhoods, and that's what we're trying to do. We're also trying to create things that, as you said, there's also some function to the way people originally built here. Bringing raised allows us to be more, in keeping with challenges we have with flooding. There are a variety of other things. So there is some, there is other function within the support of what we're doing. But overall, it's to really protect those neighborhoods and make sure that the character of those neighborhoods stays the same. And what we've got going on. I think at the end of the day, as we see application of it, we may tweak it here or there. But the more important part was the overall part we needed to do. And I think stepping forward with the ordinance is great. Is it, again, one of those that's perfect? No. We probably, as we implement it, we'll probably find out that we didn't think of every single thing. The part that got me was I didn't want to punish somebody like Fred Gunther in midstream in his development. I mean, that's the worst time to do it. You've got involved, you're engaged, and he does something based on a parking requirement. And again, Marina was very clear that the parking requirement did not apply in that area. But I think there was a little bit of question until that time, trying to figure that out. So again, it's going through those kind of things, just making sure that we're not somebody's in the middle of doing a project that thought they understood the rules, and now the rules change, and now it severely impacts what they could do. Those are the ones I was more concerned about. But I thought it was good work, and I was glad to see they made the changes so that they would not have adversely impacted Mr. Gunther's project.
What did you think of his request to hold off on implementation to allow projects to, that we're currently?
I think there is a grace period in there already in the ordinance, and I think that's fine. I think it allows you to if you're moving on something, to get moving, but it kind of allows you at this point, for planning purposes, we've given you 6 months to plan into it. You ought to be able to figure it out and go read the ordinance. And if you find something that's a problem, come back and talk to us. I mean, again, I think we're trying to work with it. I thought going to the 18 inches that was going to make it more easily accessible for handicap. I mean, those were good points by Sherry. But Sherry ended up voting for the thing, so she supported it. I was happy to see that. Even though she had challenges with some of the part of the raised, I think the raised portion is really good for us when we see flooding. I think there's a reason historical structures were raised to deal with flooding, and it's probably not a bad move that we have that. But I do appreciate the desire to lessen that height to 18 inches, so building a ramp was still not as prohibitive to some people.
Back on the oysters for a second.
Yes.
The May 8th letter, what was the reason that you guys started looking at this in the first place? Did somebody ask you to change the line?
Somebody asked me last year. There was a request for an oyster lease in that area, and so we looked at it. So I was familiar with it. Like I said before, right now somebody is seeking a lease. When they do that, the state of Florida opens it up for a comment period, which is why whether it's I read the comment that Commissioner Underhill made saying he didn't think that was what their job is supposed to comment. I mean, it's an open comment period. You're supposed to be, comment periods are open for you to comment, not to say it's the state's job. They're asking for your input. The question is whether you wish to input for your citizens or not input for your citizens. I mean, you may decide you don't want to input for your citizens. That's your decision. I felt like we should take a position for our citizens. They've asked for it. We took a position that said, hey, we certainly want you to think about this thing, and we would rather you take this line going northward. And, not a single person that my understanding, while they didn't come here, I know they went to the county and they talked, and when I've talked to them, they've ever said, listen, we don't want to do aquaculture. It's not that we want to stop aquaculture in the city of Pensacola. We think it's great. We've eaten Donnie's oysters. They're great oysters. We just want it to happen in a way that doesn't infringe on what we have, and there's a way just up the street, and you have miles of coastline. But I'll give you the map here, and you're certainly welcome to look at it, take any pictures you want to. It kind of shows a clearer picture when you see the map.
So this is residents of the area asked you initially last year?
Correct. They asked me when I was a county commissioner. I met with Putnam staff last year, and when I met with Putnam staff, they were like, if the city came to us and said this, we would honor it. So, I was not in the capacity to do that last year. This year, I find myself in that capacity.
Should property owners be given, that much pull simply because they have a view?
Again, I think they should always, in any democracy, be given the chance to comment. It is ultimately those that make the decision at the Department of Agriculture.
But they weren't commenting, you were commenting on their behalf as a public official.
They were commenting and we were commenting.
On their behalf.
Correct, but we represent them.
So what if someone else came to you and said, oh, I really want them out there?
We
they live across town.
We have those things all the time. At the end of the day, when I look at it and have to make the decision is, as you look at the map, there's not much of a difference. You can come right back to the same place and go further north.
Except for the salinity.
I mean, again, the salinity will be, it still says it's an applicable oyster growing area. I think we all have the right to debate things in the public realm, and then the decision gets made. All right. Thank you very much. Aiden, thank you. And